Mhm. All right, we'll go ahead and begin. So good evening. My name is Savannah Lytle, and I'm currently serving with MountainTrue through AmeriCorps Project Conserve. Thank you for tuning in tonight. If this is your first MountainTrue University, it's a speaker series that began back at the start of the pandemic in 2020, where we have different members of our staff or folks associated with MountainTrue give a talk on something that they're experts on. So this webinar series happens a lot more infrequently now as more events are offered again in person, but occasionally we still hold these MountainTrue University webinars. And all of them have been recorded and they're uploaded on our website. So if you're interested in watching any more of them, there's a lot of them really cool to check out. And they're also on our YouTube. So if you're unfamiliar with MountainTrue, it's a regional environmental nonprofit spread across the Southern Blue Ridge that aims to help create resilient forests, clean waters, and healthy, equitable communities. There's so many ways to get connected through MountainTrue, ranging from educational programs to guided adventures to volunteer opportunities and so much more. There's a lot of ways that you could get involved. So today we have MountainTrue's Healthy Communities Director, Chris Joyell, here to talk about smart growth. And before I pass it over to him, I want to give a quick note on Zoom and how tonight will go. So I know most of us have spent probably way too much time at this point on Zoom, but in case it's new to you or the webinar format is, I just want to give a quick tip. So if you scroll your mouse on your computer or if you swipe on your phone, there will be a toolbar, and on that toolbar, there's some different icons. The important one is the Q&A box. You don't typically see that in just a regular meeting, but if you have a question that comes to you throughout the webinar, if you'll just drop it in that box, and Chris will have some time at the end to answer questions. And I also wanted to clarify with the webinar that there's no option for video or sound. All interactions are through questions in the chat. And this is being recorded. So if you'd like to go back and watch it, or you would like to share it with someone, it will be up on our YouTube and website soon where you could share it or watch it. And if you have any other questions, feel free to drop them in the chat, but I will go ahead and pass it over to Chris.
All right, let me get my presentation up. And thanks for joining us today. We're going to be talking about the Buncombe County Comprehensive Plan, planning process that's currently underway. My name is Chris Joyell, and I'm the director of the Healthy Communities program here at MountainTrue. Back in 2017, my organization, the Asheville Design Center, merged with MountainTrue to incorporate the built environment into the larger scope of MountainTrue's work. So yeah, a big part of my focus is on the human environment, the cities and towns and rural lands that we occupy, and recognizing that we want those areas to be as serviceable and as beautiful as the natural areas that the rest of our staff is out there protecting. We'll talk a little bit about that balance today too, as we talk about comprehensive planning and the importance of creating livable cities and towns in order to take pressure off of the natural areas that we love so much. So as a little bit of background, the comprehensive planning process is currently underway. It is a state requirement that any county or municipality that has any form of zoning or any form of land use controls in the books goes ahead and creates a comprehensive plan, usually on average about every 20 years. And that's in order to stay legal with those land use controls that are in place. So Buncombe County's last plan was back in 2000 or so. I'm going to miss that. It might have been 2002. And that plan was looking all the way out to today and anticipating how Buncombe County would grow and how we want to plan for that growth. So now here we are at 2022, and we have the opportunity to, again, look ahead. We know that we'll probably have this plan completed by 2023. Thus, you see that is the 2043 comprehensive plan. So we're looking another 20 years out there, another generation away. and thinking about how is our region going to change and how do we have to plan for that in order to have the community that we want. So I'll do a little bit of work first just to kind of set the table for you and let you understand some of the issues that we're facing as we contemplate this comprehensive plan. And then I'll bring it around to what the probably like the top 3 priorities for MountainTrue are in this comprehensive plan. Noting that, again, my focus is on the built environment, so that's what we're going to focus on today. But know that we have a team of French Broad Riverkeeper and our forest team that are working on public lands. So a lot of the natural areas that we all care about and that we love, those are being well taken care of by the rest of our staff. And then they leave it to me to look at the towns and cities and all the places in between and all the ways that we get to those places in between, and make sure that we're taking care of that as well. So we have a fantastic human environment that matches the natural environment of the Southern Blue Ridge. All right, so little bit of history. We'll look back almost 50 years ago. It's kind of hard to see in this map, but I've got a giant arrow pointing towards Buncombe County, smack in the middle of western North Carolina. The little threads of yellow that you can see in there, that is the areas that have been developed, impervious surfaces. You can just see that throughout western North Carolina about 50 years ago, it was not very populated. Buncombe County itself had about 150,000 people in the county. We're now up to 270,000, so we've gained 170,000 in about 45 years. And we're projected to add probably another 75,000 people in the next 25 years to Buncombe County. So we're going to see a significant increase in our area just in population. That 75,000 people are going to require nearly 40,000 new homes to live in as well. So something that we are going to grapple with is where do those homes go, and how do we welcome our new neighbors and create a more vibrant community, and one that affords opportunity to people of all walks of life. So if we walk a little bit through this land use map, you'll see that by 2006, just about 30 years later, you can just see the development really starting to encroach. And of course, those lines that you're seeing are following many of the main transportation corridors throughout western North Carolina. You're seeing a lot of growth that's kind of creeping in from Charlotte as well in the lower right-hand corner of that composite of western North Carolina. But again, kind of looking at the center of our map at Buncombe County, you can see this XY axis that's beginning to get developed. That XY axis is I-26 running north and south through Buncombe County, and I-40 running east-west through Buncombe County. So again, you're just seeing that development tends to follow the transportation corridors that we've set out. Really stressing the importance of having a strong transportation plan that underlies your comprehensive plan. Because wherever you put the roads, that's where people are going to eventually live. So now we boot it up a little bit further and we look at where we're projecting in 2030. You can almost see a corridor filling in between Hendersonville and Asheville, and that I think is something that we should be able to anticipate, that as those two population centers continue to grow and as it becomes more and more difficult to find affordable housing within each of those municipalities, that growth is just going to start growing in between, and sooner or later that corridor will fill in, and I think we'll see a kind of contiguous stream of development between Asheville and Hendersonville, and then conceivably that could begin going east and west as it goes out to Canton, out in the west, and Haywood County and beyond. We know for a fact that that these growth patterns have been well established for years, but there's also some factors that are going to change that. As we look ahead and we think about how projected population growth is going to affect North Carolina, we know that it's not going to affect all counties equally. No surprise that we're seeing a lot of growth expected in the Triangle and in the Charlotte area. But again, looking at Buncombe County, as far as western North Carolina goes, Buncombe County will really stand out. I think also Macon and Swain County are anticipating a fair amount of growth as well, and that's because they are linked on a transportation corridor to Atlanta. And so we're seeing a lot of the Atlanta population also moving north and buying up some land in those more western counties, typically pretty rural counties. So, we take a look at how our county is growing, and we recognize that very little of that growth is actually coming from the people here staying here and reproducing. For the most part, and actually, this is an old chart. This is a 2014-2015 chart. A more recent one that I just came across actually shows Buncombe County losing what we'll call a natural population growth. The population that is here is actually shrinking, but is being compensated by a much larger flood of in-migrants, people coming from other areas of the country and moving to Asheville. So while we are losing more and more natives in the Buncombe County area, we are gaining and compensating for that, overcompensating for that with in-migration coming to our region. So when we project out the 75,000 people that are going to be moving here, it's a good chance that well over 75,000 of those people will be new to the region, because we will have lost some people in Buncombe as well. The other factor that I think is really driving this growth in our region, and something that I think is going to change the calculus of this growth, when we're projecting population growth, a lot of that is looking in the rearview mirror at population trends in the past, and then projecting forward, and looking at population generational populations and how that shifts as well. We know that we've got millennials coming up and buying homes now, with Generation Z coming right behind them. But the millennials is the largest generation in history coming up now, and replacing many of the baby boomers. But one factor that I don't think that we have adequately adequately calculated for is the climate retreaters, the folks that are going to find that Florida is no longer hospitable, or the Gulf Coast or Texas is as hospitable as it used to be. And they're going to be looking for more stable climates, less susceptible to natural disasters, and an elevation that brings a more regulated climate. And I think that is the Southern Blue Ridge. It is going to be no surprise that people find that it's much cooler here. We have far fewer, other than really flooding and landslides, we've been relatively blessed when it comes to natural disasters. I guess we've had a couple forest fires as well, but we have nothing on the scale of what we see happening in Florida or California or Texas. And as climate change really makes its impact felt in the next 30, 50 years, I think we're going to see more and more people retreating from the susceptible areas to climate change and moving to safer, more stable areas like Asheville. So I have to say that I think the 75,000 people here in 25 years is a low ball estimate. So we really should be planning for, I would say more than that. So that kind of brings us full circle back to the comprehensive plan and our opportunity to look 20 years ahead and think about what we want Buncombe County to look like, how we want it to function, how it can serve its community members best, and there's a process for that. So I'll quickly try and walk through what a comprehensive plan actually is. It is that 20-year vision that addresses the community's needs and wants. It guides growth and helps us coordinate our investments around that growth. So when we have a capital investment plan that couples with the growth that we're anticipating, we can develop the services and the commercial centers and the areas that make a community thrive. And also thinking about where we want to invest in housing, which we're going to spend a lot of time on today. And it does connect the physical operation of the county with its investments. The key components are the vision, which is something that is being hammered out as we speak. Probably, I think it's safe to say it's concluding. And then we'll look at goals and performance metrics, ways to measure whether or not we're actually doing what we are set out to do. From that will be a collection of policies that will have to be enacted by our county commissioners. They will have to actually pass new ordinances to be able to carry out those policies. So it's really important to stress that the work that goes into a comprehensive plan is really just the tip of the iceberg. The initiatives, the policies that are identified in a comprehensive plan are great. They are unfortunately not worth more than the weight of the paper that they are printed on. They need ordinances to be put in place in order for those policies to really come to life. So this is in many ways an aspirational document, and it's one that guides not just today's county commissioners, but future county commissioners that haven't been elected into office, but when they do, they'll have this continuity. They'll be able to look back at a comprehensive plan and say, well, where does our community want us to go? Instead of constantly reassessing and changing that strategy with every election. We have this steady touchstone that a comprehensive plan provides that encapsulates what the sense of the community is and what the desires are, and it gives our county leaders the permission to lead us there. And so lastly, I talked about the implementation of that. That is something that MountainTrue is dedicated to sticking around and seeing these policies and these recommendations all the way through to enactment. So, some of the things that we'll be discussing today, I'm sure it will not be the last time you'll hear from us as we discuss them, because there will come a day when we're going to be turning to our county commissioners and asking them to write new policy, write new ordinances in order to see these ideas come into play. The focus areas for the county comprehensive plan range from everything from housing and transportation, looking at our agricultural lands, naturally, the environmental protection and recreational opportunities, community health. I mentioned that we are not really susceptible to many natural hazards and disasters, but nonetheless, we still need to plan and have resiliency and hazard mitigation plans in place, with the anticipation that the flooding that we do receive and the landslides that we do receive, and more recently the forest fires that we've seen, like what we saw down in Polk and Henderson County, down in the Batcave area a few years ago, we should be anticipating that those events are only going to increase in severity and frequency with climate change accelerating. So that is also something that we need to be able to plan for. We're looking at the long-term sustainability and looking at infrastructure investments within the county, and of course economic development, which is the engine that drives a lot of these things. I should mention probably at this point that I am one of 22 members of the Buncombe County Steering Committee. So I am working with 21 fellow citizens, volunteers, working together to inform and provide feedback to county staff and the consultants that are working with them in the development of their plan. We meet on a monthly basis, and we've just finally started meeting in person, which has been really great, just to be able to finally meet some of the folks that I've been staring at through a Zoom screen for the past 6 months. But it's in those groups where we're actually able to take some of the more lofty ideas that come out of the planning process and test them with members of the community, and seeing how these resonate with members of the community, and seeing if we actually will have effective policies in place that will have the support of the community. So I feel very fortunate to be part of that steering committee, and it also affords me a great opportunity to help influence the process as well. So a lot of what we'll be talking about today, this is kind of my take home work, or like my homework that I have to study before each of our steering committee meetings. The process itself, as I mentioned, we are now through phase 2. So we launched a project back in the early fall of 2021, and then spent the winter months really building the vision and goals for this comprehensive planning process. We've now come out of that process, which involved a lot of community engagement, surveys that were taken, a lot of in-person meetings and virtual meetings where community informed the plan. We've taken all that input and have now begun to develop some of the policies and strategies that we can use That will eventually inform a land use map that will be kind of the key to how we envision the growth of this county. And we'll also begin discussing draft policies and strategies and how we see those playing out. And then eventually we'll move, I think, into probably the next year. I would say like somewhere in the, well, in the latter months of this year and the early months of next year, where we will finally get the plan into such shape that it can be presented to our county commissioners for adoption. And once it's adopted, then then the hard work begins. Then we'll begin thinking about how we can start implementing the recommendations that came out of this plan. There will be another opportunity for community engagement coming up this summer when a draft plan is produced. The county consultants will create this draft plan, and then they'll share it with the public, and that'll be an opportunity to really weigh in on individual components of this plan rather than the kind of more lofty vision and goals. This is getting down to brass tacks. This is when you'll have an opportunity to read the plan, and it'll be divided into chapters, so you can find what resonates with you most and focus on a chapter, like just one chapter, or you can pick up the entire volume and comb through the entire thing. And either way, you're going to have plenty of opportunity to weigh in on that draft plan, the elements that you like, the elements that you don't like, the elements that need to be changed. And that's a really important phase of this project because you'll finally have something concrete to weigh in on. And they'll take that feedback very seriously. And I think that will help shape the final plan. So stay tuned as we get going on that. We will definitely share with our membership opportunities to weigh in on a draft plan when that becomes available. All right, so we're looking at Buncombe County. The Buncombe County Comprehensive Plan only addresses the unincorporated land in the county. So the incorporated land, that is our municipalities. They've incorporated, so you can see we have 6 municipalities in Buncombe County. We got Weaverville starting at the north to Woodfin, Asheville kind of spanning all the way down to the south, Biltmore Forest nestled in there, and then off to the east we have Black Mountain and MountainTrue. Each of those municipalities is also creating their own comprehensive plan, have their own set of zoning rules, their own incentives, their own sets of policies, and that really governs what happens within those municipalities. Because as soon as you step outside of those municipalities, you are then in county unincorporated land. And looking at just the sheer volume of land, if you look at just the municipalities versus the rest of the county, it seems like the county has a lot of land to manage, and there's a much broader scope to be able to take into consideration. And so you would think with 75,000 people coming here in 25 years that the counties and the municipalities would be able to figure out how to distribute that kind of growth. It doesn't really happen like that very often. What we're finding when we look at past records, we're seeing growth within municipalities is matched by the growth in the unincorporated areas as well. So it isn't evenly distributed. Well, it is evenly distributed. You would think that it would be distributed far more towards the municipalities, but that's not necessarily the case. So as we begin thinking about how are we going to absorb 75,000 people in this county, don't be fooled by this map and looking at all the unincorporated land and thinking like, oh, we have a lot of available land to work with, because there are a number of constraints that really limit how much developable land we have to work with. Those constraints can contain everything from like national forests that you see in big blocks of green. We have ridge top protections and steep slope protections that don't necessarily preclude development, especially on steep slopes, but it does create a number of hurdles for developers to build on steep slopes. But you can see in the pink and the light blue, all those areas that have been shaded, those are under some pretty strict restrictions for development. Add in the 100-year floodplains, which likely are going to expand as we see the frequency and volume of rain increase with climate change. But those maps in and of themselves lay out areas that are very difficult to build in as well, because we don't want to build in floodways for obvious reasons. But if it's not obvious, every time you build and you put a structure in a floodway, you are displacing more water that cannot just wash into the fields or the surrounding areas around a river or stream. And instead, by encountering a structure, that water gets displaced, which means it gets pushed either further downstream and into another community, or it gets backed up. So we want to really kind of reduce or preclude as much development in the floodplains as possible. So if you're looking at this map, really all that's really left within the county, and we haven't even carved out the areas that are municipalities, but the areas that are white are really the areas that are probably most suitable for development. But again, you have to have connections as well. You need a transportation network that can connect them all. One of the things that really drives growth in the county, and this is for every county, is sewer and water. Those are really the two drivers behind development. You will find, there are plenty of developments where septic may be the only option, or what they call like a service pack that can treat a larger development, but it is basically working as a mini sewer treatment plant. But for the vast majority of the people that live in the county and live in municipalities, they're being served by our MSD, our sewer service area, service provider. Add to that the potable water sources that we have, and that's drinking water services that are provided by Asheville, Weaverville, Woodfin, each have them. Black Mountain, I think, has a combination where they purchase some from Asheville and some from artesian wells or artisan wells. But obviously, water and sewer are key determinants in predicting where that growth is going to come from. So if we look at parcels that are located near those water and sewer lines, it's no surprise that, taking one jump further, the zoning in our county, outside of the municipalities in this map, again, colored in dark gray. But if we look at the zoning in this map, it's all the little colored parcels that you can see in there. That's what has been zoned by the county in everything other than what is known as open use zoning. So everything in beige is known as open use zoning, which basically means almost anything goes. There are a few restrictions on what types of development can take place in open use zoning areas, but they are really far-flung rural areas with very little infrastructure reaching out to them. So they're not really the most desirable places for large developers to focus their energies. Developers usually want to build closer to the municipalities because that's where your services, where your jobs and your infrastructure already exist. And if developers can find parcels of land that sit close to those municipalities, they're much more desirable. So the county has focused their zoning efforts on those parcels that are closest to those services and infrastructure. It's worth noting that Buncombe County has really only had zoning for 10 years. Might be off a year or two on that, but it is relatively recent. It's definitely been, I've been here for 17 years, and I do recall when I first moved here being utterly shocked that our county had no zoning, and that was enacted relatively recently. And so it's understandable that we didn't try and be overly ambitious when we first started out and try and zone the entire county, every square inch of it. Instead, it was a compromise, I think, that was struck in order to focus the zoning efforts on the areas closest to the municipalities and closest to those services and infrastructure that we discussed, while leaving the rest of the county in this open use zoning that really had, I guess, treads with a very light touch on the rest of the county. And that was kind of the compromise that we were able to strike back in the day. Likely that'll change because our metro region, and I'm saying with our metro region, I'm really looking at Madison County, Henderson County, Haywood County as well. That metro region, once that tips 500,000, and we're going to probably tip 500,000 people in the metro region by 2025, that's going to change the calculus for a lot of folks coming to this area. Developers, investors, commercial development, industrial development, all look at that number, that 500,000, as a key tipping point for a region. So when we reach that capacity, I think we could actually anticipate a ramp up in development as well. So it's something to consider beyond just the typical growth projections that we keep rolling out there. So if we want to protect the areas that we cherish, our agricultural lands that are productive, like Big Ivy and Sandy Mush, our forested areas that give us plenty of places to recreate while also cleaning our water supply and cleaning our air, we have to strike a balance, and we have to figure out where 75,000 new residents are going to live within our county while still being able to maintain beautiful vistas like this. And that requires a little bit of a balancing act that we'll discuss as we kind of get into this. So I mentioned that MountainTrue has really set out three main goals that we're aiming for to come out of this comprehensive plan. The three main things that we are advocating for are housing density in the right places, housing choice, and examining or creating a plan for a countywide transit system. I think that these three elements are absolutely key to the sustainability of our built environment and our natural environment in Buncombe County. So it's going to require a little bit of work to get us there. I'm going to walk us through each one of these issues separately. So looking at housing density, one of the really new innovative programs that the county has instituted recently is this idea of community-oriented development, where the county is incentivizing developers to create more affordable housing and workforce housing in exchange for increases in density and design flexibility. So it's not necessarily a requirement. The county is not holding a developer over a barrel and telling them that they must create X amount of units or create X amount of affordable units. Instead, they're using carrots instead of sticks in this case to incentivize the developer to create the type of dense housing in the right areas. And the community-oriented development program is aligned with a few of our major transportation corridors. So it would make sense that a project like what we're looking at right here, the East Haven development in Swannanoa. Swannanoa is an unincorporated township within the county, just outside of Asheville, just east of Asheville, along Route 70. This was, I believe, when we first started out looking at this project, there was the self-storage units that you see tucked away in the back, and this was just an open field. And Mountain Housing Opportunities worked with the Design Center that I was heading up back then to do an initial examination of this site, engaging the community in a discussion of what form of development they would want to see here. You would think in a really kind of pretty rural, not very densely occupied area that there would be a lot of resistance to a development like this. But if you talk to the residents there and you discover just how hard it is to find a rental unit in that neighborhood, we found that people were actually really eager to incorporate this. So as we were able to get this development underway and established, what came with it at the very bottom of your screen, you'll see is a bus stop. A sidewalk that is typically not required in county development, but this was part of the incentive package that the county created with this community-oriented development. So we got sidewalks out of it, we got a bus shelter out of it, and anyone that has dealt with NCDOT will be shocked and amazed to learn that we even are now at the stage where we're going to have a crosswalk installed with the mechanics, with the little push buttons. To actually have a crosswalk installed on US 70, that is amazing, and that is, again, I think, kudos to the county for the work that they've been doing to be able to bring this form of development into an area that you would typically think would be very resistant to it. But once we got out and talked to folks, we realized that that wasn't the case. So we're really big fans of the community-oriented development, but what we would love to see is for that program to be expanded to all the main transportation corridors as well as the schools in our counties, because we want people to be able to live close to these community assets. And if you can locate housing close to schools, well, then you're locating kids close to schools, and thereby even maybe eliminating the need to drive them to school every day, and maybe they would be able to walk to school or ride their bike. We'd also like to see the program expand the width of the boundaries. They typically look within the corridor. I can't remember if it's an eighth of a mile or a quarter of a mile within the corridor where they afford this opportunity to develop at this level of density. We want to see that corridor widened as well, so that there's more opportunity to build projects like this.
Sorry, hit the wrong button.
No worries. So we are looking for that expansion of the community-oriented development program. We think it's a great program. And as I mentioned, we want to see that expanded along our transportation corridors throughout the county, because we feel like that's going to be a key. I'm going to come back to this idea of our transportation corridors when we talk about transit as well. One kind of very esoteric topic that I'm going to still dive into anyway is this idea of extraterritorial jurisdiction. So ETJ, in the shorthand, is envision like a 1 mile band that surrounds the city limits of Asheville or Weaverville, 1 to 3 miles, depending on your population. Basically, what ETJ allows is for a city to extend its zoning regulations beyond its city borders and a mile out into unincorporated land in the county. So if you were to build within a mile of Asheville city limits, you would have been subject to Asheville's zoning regulations as well. And Asheville zoning regulations are a bit more rigorous than the counties, and there's a lot of requirements for sidewalks, for amenities, for lighting, landscaping, that all come into play. And the idea is that cities, for all the good that cities try and do within their city limits, it can all be undone right at the edges of the city, because savvy developers will know that they can locate right on the edge of the city, gain all the benefits of a city, all the services, the water, the sewer, the fire, the police, all the things that come with that, and yet not be subject to any of the development regulations that the city has developed in order to guide that growth. The flip side of that means that anyone that was living outside the city limits was basically subject to city regulation, and they didn't have the ability to vote for city elected officials. So because of that, in 2013, Representative Tim Moffitt introduced a law that revoked Asheville and Weaverville's ETJ. I'll throw in that Boone also got their ETJ revoked. So now we don't have any way of extending Asheville's regulations a mile outside of the city limits to guide development right on the edges of the city. I will say that the county stepped up very quickly and instituted zoning on the edges of the city that are fairly strenuous, and I think demand a lot of developers and recognize what's happening within the cities. Nonetheless, there is definitely an opportunity. We're not going to restore ETJ. Our state legislature is not going to give that back to Asheville and Weaverville. I think that's recognized that we have a reputation already within the state general assembly. I don't think we're winning over anyone new that's going to be willing to give us back those powers. But I do think that it gives the county an opportunity to step in and step up. And so our call on the county is to recognize the zoning regulations within the cities of Asheville and Weaverville, and find ways to bolster the zoning that surrounds each of those cities, so that we can see a transition from our urban core into the rural, unincorporated land. The areas in between are really sensitive, and we want to make sure that they're managed properly. So that is something that we're working with the county and the municipalities to come up with a wish list from the municipalities, and then a better understanding of how the county might be able to carry that out. Second issue that we're really focused on is housing choice. Right now, it seems like if you're looking for housing in the county, you have two choices. You either have a single family home, and we know that those prices are skyrocketing, and the availability of anything under $250,000 or even $300,000 now is virtually non-existent. And we also know, and then the other option is the massive multifamily apartment complexes that are getting developed, which are also experiencing incredible reductions in vacancy. So one of the forms of housing that I think gets a bum rap, and I don't think it's fair, is mobile homes. We have a number of mobile home communities just outside of Asheville. This is one located in the Emma community, just north of West Asheville. And this is actually a community where the homeowners, so in most cases in mobile home parks, the residents own the trailer that they live in, but they do not own the land that it sits on. They're renting that land from a landlord while they own the structure that sits on top of it. And so, as you can imagine, that creates a pretty precarious situation for a lot of folks living there, where a landowner could overnight just sell the land out from under them for a new development and displace people over very quickly. And mobile homes are truly, I think, the last vestige of affordable housing left in Asheville or left in Buncombe County. And we want to see that opportunity expanded. I think that there's an opportunity to expand new mobile home housing into more base zoning districts and afford more opportunities for affordable housing in communities throughout Western North Carolina or throughout Buncombe. Here's a little legend that kind of just shows you all the various forms of activity that are allowed in each zoning district. It's really complicated. It looks a little messy. But basically, if you zero in on the manufactured housing icon, which is the avocado colored icon, you'll see that it's really only mobile homes are only allowed in 3 zoning districts, in 2 residential districts and 1 employment district, and then of course at the very bottom is open use. And that seems a bit unfair, I think, for mobile home communities to be restricted from vast amounts of the areas that are zoned from within the county. And again, those areas that are zoned in the county that are not open use, those are going to be the ones closest to the job centers that a lot of folks living in mobile homes need to get to be able to work. And if you're really kind of just singling out just a small number of zoning districts that allow for manufactured homes, I think you're really missing an opportunity to create affordable housing throughout the county. So one, we would like to see a reform in that and recognize that the mobile home of 1970 is not the mobile home of 2020. They're very, I think, much more up to date, and I think design-wise, much more appealing, but also remaining very affordable. And I can't stress that enough. One thing that I think is really laudable from the county is that virtually every zoning district that allows single-family homes also allows duplexes by right. That is not the case in the city of Asheville. Single-family homes dominate. 70% of our residential land in Asheville is zoned strictly single-family residence, which means even building an accessory dwelling unit, like a granny flat in your backyard, can be a significant hurdle. Well, in the case of Buncombe County, they're a little bit more permissible, I think, in seeing duplexes being allowed on any single family lot. That's great. I think that we can still go a step further, and we can allow triplexes and quads to exist on these single family lots as well. And that affords us a little bit more density in these communities. And it gives us the opportunity to start creating a form of housing that has really been missing off the map since 1950. That's something that we call the missing middle. So I mentioned that, between the single family home and the large multifamily apartment complex, it seems like we are missing an entire swath of housing opportunities and housing choice that's known as the missing middle. We used to build this way all the time, actually. Before World War II and really before the advent of the automobile, we built duplexes, triplexes, courtyard apartments, cottage clusters. These were occurring in many of our old pre-war neighborhoods. I live in one of them in West Asheville, and within about a 2-minute walk of my neighborhood, I can find 4 apartment complexes like this, 6 units tucked on a quarter-acre lot. So there you have 6 families that are able to live on a quarter-acre lot, bringing age diversity, bringing income diversity, bringing racial diversity to our neighborhood. And I think that's something that we should be welcoming. And I think as far as, one common complaint that we hear whenever we're looking to bring new housing into a neighborhood is that it's going to change the character of the neighborhood. Well, I think this is a demonstration that you can retain the quaint the quaint character of your neighborhood, even with a 60-unit apartment building, while also affording people a real place to live, an affordable place to live, one that is within walking distance of all the services and schools and jobs that are available in West Asheville. And right up the street from me, we've got these cute little row houses that you just don't see getting built anymore. And that's that's five families that have affordable places to live in West Asheville. That's not a lot of places to choose from, and sadly, it really is kind of the case that we're seeing dwindling vacancies, and it's becoming harder and harder to find not even an affordable place to buy, but an affordable place to rent. The last issue that I want to raise for housing choice is to call on the county to find a way to regulate short-term rentals. With the explosion of Airbnb and VRBO services, this is an old, you can see that this is just a study that was concluded in 2018, but it shows just the explosion in short-term rentals in Buncombe County just between 2015 and 2017. You can just imagine where we are now in 2022. Every time within the county a house goes into the Airbnb market, it comes out of the home buying or the rental market. So every unit that is being marketed for Airbnb use is basically being subtracted from our housing stock. So it is no surprise that it is becoming harder and harder for people to find affordable places to live when dozens and hundreds of units are being converted into short-term rentals for tourists coming here to stay for a week or less. And it's really it's crippling our housing market, and it's unregulated in the county right now. The city does regulate short-term rentals, and there are areas where it's permissible, and then there are homestays that allow for residents to be able to rent out space in their own home, but they have to live in that unit. That is not the case in the county, and we'd like to see the county step up. Lastly, I'm going to just touch on countywide transit plan. As we see more and more people forced to live outside of our urban centers because they can't find a place that they can afford in Asheville, and they're pushing out, say, into Candler or into south of Asheville, we're finding more and more that there's going to be a need for a true countywide transit system. We had Patrick Bowen presented back in really like 2020, March of 2020, just before the pandemic shut everything down. Patrick came and presented at a speaker series that MountainTrue hosts called Building Our City. And in that presentation, he did a whole study of our region and the housing availability. And we saw that the sales price was just climbing at an astronomical rate. We're well past that now. I want to say that we are now at a median sale price of $440,000 for a home in Buncombe County. And we also saw incredible drop in housing availability. Now, I'm not even showing the rental availability, which is even worse. We're at less than 1% vacancy for rental units in Buncombe County. And it's hard to even wrap your head around that. But when a rental unit goes up for availability, it is no joke. They'll receive 300 applications for that unit. So incredible competition for a reduced supply means that you're going to see astronomical prices, and that's exactly where we are today. So, you couple with that the expansion of I-240, I-26, the I-26 connector project, where ADC got its start. As that project comes into fruition, we're going to find it's going to facilitate people living further and further outside the county because they'll be able to get into town faster on a larger highway. But more often than not, the people that are forced to live outside the city and find cheaper rents, those are the people that can least afford to be car dependent as well. So we need to have a real working transit system. And it's not to belittle our existing transit system, but mountain mobility is not really going to solve the problem of mass transit in Buncombe County. You can't just carry 12 people at a time, and you're not even carrying that many. We need to create a transit plan that serves our major corridors and our major population centers outside of our cities, so that people can get into, like say, Asheville to work. We have over 50,000 people every day commuting into Asheville to work. And that means typically 50,000 cars coming into Asheville every single day. And we can do far better than that. I don't even have enough time to talk about parking downtown and how much people love to complain about parking downtown. And if we could just reduce the number of cars that we're bringing into our city every single day, we reduce the need for that parking, and we can start converting surface parking lots, the scourge of our planet, I think, into something far more productive, like housing. That would be nice. There's also the opportunity to look at a merger between the Asheville transit system and the countywide system. I think we have, opportunities. Our city transit system already runs out into Swannanoa. It used to run out into Black Mountain. That service has been shrinking a little bit here and there, and expanding within the city, but shrinking within the region. So we really need to see a robust transit system available to the people that work and want to come to Asheville. So with that, I will skip things over and see if I know that we're running up against the end of our time. Savannah, do we have any questions?
We do have one from Ray. Ray's asking, who actually produces the comprehensive plan?
So that is being carried out by a consulting firm that is working for at the direction of county staff. Ultimately, though, it'll be the county staff and then the county commission that will adopt that plan. I'd like to say, like in a truly idealistic way, that we are the authors of that plan. Through community input, we have an opportunity to shape this plan, to critique it, and I think with enough opportunity, we can really shape a plan that all our residents can really embrace. So that is underway, and hopefully we'll have a draft plan for folks to be able to review by this summer. All right, I think I'll leave it there. I've got my contact information up. Feel free to contact me if you have any questions around the comprehensive planning process. If you're viewing this from another community and you're concerned about your community and whether or not they have a comprehensive plan in place, feel free to reach out to me. I'm working in Henderson County right now, just getting started, working up in Madison County on their comprehensive plan. Never enough comprehensive plans to work with at one time. So if you're seeing this and you're outside of Buncombe County and you have an interest in this, certainly feel free to contact me as well. But thanks for joining us, and thank you, Savannah, for facilitating this. And I hope everyone has a great evening.
Awesome. Thank you, Chris, and thank you to those who attended as well. Have a great evening.
Thanks, everyone.